Okay, Jean, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
And Brian, if you could go ahead and turn off your camera, unless you're going to be speaking. Thank you.
Do you want me to take off to go back on?
Yep, everybody can go off of the speaker. Jean and the panelists can go ahead and go off. And we're ready.
So I should start?
Yes, go ahead and start.
Okie dokie. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arlington Committee 100's November program. And I'm Jean Broyhill, and I'm the Committee 100 Board Chair. Tonight is the last program of this year, which is hard to believe. The program tonight is Seeking Shelter from Incarceration, how Arlington County is addressing the homelessness and the mental health crisis. If you're watching us on Facebook Live and you think one of your friends would be interested, please consider sharing the Facebook Live to your page. I want to start with welcoming the elected officials who are with us tonight. Welcome Parisha Dalhani Tofty, and I hope I got that right, Arlington and Falls Church's Commonwealth Attorney, and Jose Juarez, our County Sheriff. Thank you for joining us tonight. Any other elected officials online, please let us know by sending a note through the Q&A box, and I'll recognize you later in the program. A big thank you to the committee board members, Devanshi Patel, program co-chair, and Brian Coleman for pulling this program together. Also, thanks to Liz Nora, Karen Bate, Hannah Dana Felser, and Dan Dixon for their communication and technical support. We may need to go over a little after our 8 p.m. tonight, and if that's the case, I hope you'll hang in with us because it's going to be a great presentation. As I mentioned earlier, this is our last program for 2023, and the first program in 2024 will be January 9th. We will get back to you later with more information. And now the appeal. A financial donation automatically makes you a member, or two of you if you're a couple, during this current membership year that ends June 30th, 2024. We need your continued financial support to cover our operational and technical expenses. You can donate online using a credit card or by writing a check to the P.O. Box also on our website. Even if you're already a member, additional donations are needed also and always appreciated, particularly this time of year. Even if you can also volunteer with our organization by going to our website under Get Involved and filling out the form. Submit your questions to our panelist or a specific speaker at any time during the program using the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. A quick reminder to add your name and write your question in the form of a question. And thank you for those who submitted your questions when signing up. They are a great start to our Q&A period. We have 97 people on the line tonight, so I suspect we'll get many of them. And a little background about the topic tonight and what you can expect, and just to put it into a framework. Our nation is facing a dual housing and mental health crisis, and Arlington County is no exception. This is not news to anyone. For nearly 13 years, the county has worked to end homelessness, starting with the 100 Homes campaign in 2011 to the current Continuum of Care, a regional planning entity consisting of government entities, local nonprofit partners, and community stakeholders to coordinate housing and homeless services, funding, and policies. Similarly, after the killing of Marcus David Peters, a young Black biology teacher by Richmond Police in 2018 amid a mental health crisis, the county has been examining the use of law enforcement resources and responding to crisis calls that involve individuals with mental health issues. In 2020, County Manager Mark Schwartz created the Police Practice Group, consisting of community members appointed to lead a review of police policies and best practices in 4 key areas, including mental health and policing. The issues of homelessness and mental health and incarceration are intertwined. This program is a small chapter of the larger book on homelessness. Tonight, we will hear from the county government on its prevention efforts in the areas of homelessness and mental health, including the county's co-responder model based on the partnership between Department of Health, Human Services, and the police department. The Committee of 100 is looking at ways to expand the discussion and amplify other issues in the homeless space. We encourage you to join us in that journey or allow us to support your efforts to lead future conversations for the community. And now, finally, to our speakers, and they will be presenting in this order. Nicole Dula is the Housing Bureau Director for Arlington's Department of Human Services, or DHS. She will contextualize the topic with background on national, statewide, and local efforts. She will also help us understand other efforts taken by the county, including the county's equity work on these issues. Deputy Police Chief Wayne Vincent wasn't able to be with us this evening. However, we are delighted to hear from Lieutenant Steve Proud. Lieutenant Proud will tell us about the work of the Police Practices Group through the police department's data regarding people in crisis with both housing and mental health. He will also help us to understand the efforts to implement non-law enforcement responses in certain situations. Finally, Lieutenant Proud will talk about the police department DHS work to implement other recommendations of the police practice group. And finally, Tiffany Jones and Michael Keaton will also join us from DHS to discuss the county's MOST project, the implementation of the Marcus Alert System and the Path Tow framework, and they will provide further definitions of those acronyms when they speak. So welcome all. And before we start with Dula, Nicola, each speaker will have 8 minutes to make opening remarks in the order that they were introduced. I will interrupt you at about the 7-minute mark to wrap up your presentation. We will then go to questions from the audience, and we will get to as many questions as possible. If a question is to all our speakers, the first to raise their hand will just wave in the chat room here. They will take the lead, and we'll just take it from there. I will monitor to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. And on that, I turn it over to Nicole Dula for the discussion from DHS.
Thank you for having me. I think we're just waiting for the presentation to load. Awesome, thank you. Well, good evening. Again, my name is Nicole Dula, Housing Bureau Director with the Department of Human Services. I want to thank you all for having me again here tonight to talk about Arlington County's continuum of care and our response to homelessness. Go to the next slide. Want to just start a little bit about who we are and what we do. As a continuum of care, we are effectively known as a federally recognized planning body that coordinates housing, facilitates prevention services, and funding for homeless families and individuals. Arlington County's continuum of care, otherwise I'll refer to as a COC, is a collaboration between community nonprofits, people with lived experience, public programs, public service, all working to help implement strategies that we've codified in a strategic plan in order to meet federal and state requirements aimed to end homelessness. I've added a QR code of our most recently adopted strategic plan, A Way Home for All, for those that are interested in reading more. Our COC in Arlington has spent over a decade strengthening its crisis response system to prevent homelessness and resolve homelessness by swiftly connecting individuals and families to housing. So our mission is to sustain an integrated community-based support system which will help households at risk of homelessness keep their housing, or will assist any household that becomes homeless to regain stable housing. Next slide. This is a visual of how we do our work and connect people to housing. This flow diagram is our centralized access system, CAS. It works to provide access to services across the entire continuum of care, matching households in crisis as quickly as possible with the interventions that most effectively and efficiently prevent or end their homelessness. As people are connected through our centralized access system, DHS staff work with households to divert or prevent their episodes of homelessness. We do this work by quickly identifying and offering access to safe alternatives to shelter, which can either be one, connecting them to community resources or natural family supports through diversion practices, or two, we provide flexible financial assistance such as eviction prevention funding, which we refer to as targeted prevention. For those residents who are already sleeping outside on the streets or unsheltered population, we deploy street outreach and engagement teams. These are teams that are highly skilled outreach workers that work to connect individuals living on the street and help them navigate and help those residents navigate towards a path to housing and other services. And you'll hear more from Michael King later in this presentation about those street outreach efforts. Continuing on with the interventions of our centralized access system, where homelessness cannot be prevented, our system assists with referrals to 5 of our area shelters. We have 2 single shelter within Arlington, 2 family shelters, as well as a domestic violence safe house. Through these shelter partnerships, we are equipped to offer programs like rapid rehousing, which is a short-term rental assistance subsidy, or other long-term permanent supportive housing streams, such as a housing grant, a housing choice voucher, or permanent supportive housing. These interventions utilize best practices such as housing first and trauma-informed care, which centers people's experiences and their strengths when developing individualized housing plans for their long-term success. Next slide. So I'm going to breeze through just a glimpse of what the state of homelessness looks like in Arlington as of FY23. Next slide. Given the model flow that the diagram that I just showed, during our FY23, 468 people were served through that centralized access system. And that is effectively 189 single adults and 74 families accessing shelter within our county. During that same time period, 437 of those individuals or those households were served in shelter beyond a 24-hour stay. Only 10% of the adults that we serve are justice involved, which is either they came to us through exiting prisons, jail, or a juvenile detention facility. Next slide. So the strategies that we use across the COC are effective, and you can see that with our median length of stay of 3 months in shelter. 40% of those individuals that reside in shelter exit to some form of permanent housing. For those that are moved on to a rapid rehousing, a short-term subsidy program, 86% exit that short-term rental subsidy program onto another form of permanent housing. For those that receive permanent supportive housing, 93% maintain their housing once they've reached that mark and or graduate those programs because they've regained income and can sustain housing on their own, absent a subsidy. Next slide. So across our entire continuum of care, including our unsheltered residents, our clients that are in shelter, rapid rehousing, or permanent supportive housing or DV programs, we have nearly 1,200 people served in FY23. The greater majority are single adults, which is the 856 number, and 105 families are reflected. The COC also actively works to support and address homelessness among subpopulations, such as our veterans, transition age youth that are between the ages of 18 and 24, and those experiencing chronic homelessness and residents living with mental health disorders. Next slide. One of the continuum of care's federal requirements is to conduct a one-day overnight.
Nicole, you need to wrap it up.
Yep. Annual enumeration of people experiencing homelessness. This is just a point in time count to show the reduction of homelessness that Arlington County has sustained since 2013. So a 55.5% reduction in homelessness. We can go to the next slide. In terms of the county board's adopted equity resolution, Just want to highlight here, African Americans and those that identify are Black are overrepresented in our shelter population. As a COC, we are committed to lifting the voices of people with lived experience in our efforts as we effectively build our practices and policies moving forward. You can go to the next slide. Just the takeaways that I have is that our housing programs work and is the solution to solving homelessness. There's noted racial disparities that we must remain at the forefront. Support for an undocumented residents is a need, and childcare and living wage employment remain a constant focus. And the last slide I have, next slide, is just in terms of how to reach us. If you observe a neighbor in need or you know someone's in need, how to reach us within the continuum of care. Here are some important numbers that we have available. Thank you.
And now we move on to Lieutenant Prout.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And thank you guys for having us and letting the police department take part in this. I'll just let the slide load up. Thank you very much. The police department is very committed. They spoke briefly about the police practices group and some of the things that came out of that. And one of those was obviously working with all of our stakeholders to really embrace diversion as far as trying to remove law enforcement from both mental health as well as some of the homeless issues that we see in the county. The police department really has a continual contact with our homeless population in Arlington. And this is for the most part, a very passive relationship as it just progresses forward. That said, we embrace crisis intervention training, and we definitely work with our DHS partners and collaborate with them to ensure that we can divert individuals when we can. And we also work within our business outreach unit to speak with those sectors of our community to make sure that we can address their issues while also making sure that someone is not just pipelined into our prison. Next slide, please. Obviously, a lot of this and some of the things that we work towards are just engagement, and the Community Engagement Division speaks specifically to this. We have continuing and ongoing relationships with the Department of Human Services, as I mentioned. And some of the diversion methods that we have embraced is we are very much in support of our mobile outreach support team and working to get them. And Mike Keene's going to speak about that in a little bit, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. In just ensuring that a majority of our officers who are in our operations section are CIT trained and certified. This has done a lot to mitigate any type of issues that might arise that would historically may have resulted in incarceration. And we've tried to make sure that we've been able to identify services until incarceration is a last resort, if you will. Obviously, if certain felonies are committed, we do not have a choice in that option. But, you know, for misdemeanor violations, if there are things, be it public drunkenness, trespassing, we work with those members of the community to make sure that they know that there are other avenues through the Doorways program, as Nicole previously mentioned, to ensure that they just have some options. And we want to make sure that those options are very clear. And we don't want to be overt, and the police want to be removed, especially through a lot of these efforts. Absent of that, in supporting most, we obviously take part in the Crisis Intervention Center and DHS and how they have brought that up. And we are, Arlington County and the police department is well ahead of what the state protocols are for the Marcus Alert implementation that we're working towards in 2024. Other than that, the police, you know, we obviously want to continually engage with our community and collaborate with the stakeholders, the residents, and just make sure that, you know, all the needs that can be addressed are being addressed. Thank you very much for the time. And if you guys have any questions, just send them my way.
Put your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll get to that after the next couple of presentations, which is now Tiffany and Michael. I'm going to assume you guys are going to go in the order that you have chosen, and I'll give you all a little extra time since they're the two of you.
Thank you very much, Jane. If you could please go to the next slide. And as Jean is going to the next slide, I just want to thank you all for having my colleagues and I here tonight. It's such a great honor and privilege to be here with you. As Jean mentioned earlier, my name is Tiffany Jones. I'm the Marcus Alert Coordinator with the Department of Human Services and for Arlington County. So I'm here to speak with you today about Marcus Alert. And I like to consider Marcus Alert as the framework of our crisis continuum. It is a mandated system in the state of Virginia that can be classified as a living organism that will continue to grow. It is a system that does require a collaborative effort between the Department of Human Services as well as our stellar partners. And those partners are the Arlington County Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, our Emergency Communication Center, which is our PSAP, also known as 911, and then the Fire Department. If we could please go to the next slide. So how do we get to Marcus Alert? As Jean mentioned earlier in the beginning of the program, Marcus Alert was implemented due to the enactment of Marcus David Peters Act. And that was enacted due to the death of Marcus David Peters, a 24-year-old biology teacher in Richmond, Virginia, who was having a behavioral health crisis and ultimately was shot and killed by law enforcement. So in response to that, they took action, went through the General Assembly in 2020. Governor Northam enacted the Marcus David Peters Act. So now each locality in the state of Virginia is required to implement the Marcus Alert system. We will be implementing the Marcus Alert system in 2024, and more details will be published as we go through the implementation phases. So overall, the purpose of the Marcus Alert system is to ensure that when there is an emergency response to a behavioral health crisis, the individual who is experiencing the crisis receives a behavioral health response. And so we do that on so many different levels, which I will get further into throughout the presentation. In terms of implementation, it takes teamwork. So as I mentioned, it's a collaborative effort between DHS and our stellar partners, but it also requires the participation and teamwork of our community leaders. And so we have a stakeholder group, which consists of a little over 80 members. So we have the mission group, which sets priorities and establishes timelines. They review the implementation progress as well as other critical responsibilities. And then we have our technical group, who basically examines the county current behavioral health crisis system and works collaboratively with the mission group. So we work very closely together. We will be having our next Marcus Alert stakeholder group meeting on December 7th. So we're really excited about that, to continue to join with other like-minded individuals who are passionate about enhancing our crisis continuum of care. In terms of the target and mission, the main purpose is to ensure that everyone has equal opportunity, accessibility to services, and is treated with dignity and respect and given the proper services that they need to thrive. However, there is a specific mission to increase the availability of and access to racially responsive crisis supports. So essentially, in short summary, to target the BIPOC community. Next slide, please. So in terms of Marcus Alert, we do follow the sequential intercept model, which is demonstrated here on the slide. So we mainly focus on intercept 0 and intercept 1. So I'll briefly go into the protocols very quickly. Protocol 1 is how Arlington would transfer calls from 911 to 988. I do just want to share with you all that our emergency communications center partners have been doing a wonderful job in getting trained on mental health, psychotic disorders, substance use, suicide prevention, trauma-informed care, various different topics that will help them learn how to assess and manage and transfer calls when they receive Marcus Alert type calls. So they've been working very hard to get ready to prepare for the implementation of Marcus Alert. On top of that initiative, we've also modified our EMD mental health cards that call takers and dispatchers refer to when calls come through the Peace app. So we are working very collaboratively with our partners to make sure that our Peace app is supported as we implement Marcus Alert, but most importantly, to ensure that those calls are properly transferred. In terms of transferring calls from 911 to 988, 988 is our suicide crisis hotline that has been around for a very long time. It is just now a short number, 988. And they just recently launched the campaign for 988 this summer. And so essentially this hotline can be utilized 24/7, 365 days a year. And anyone who is having a bad day, just simply needs someone to talk to, or needs any form of support and care, can call this hotline. And so basically the state is asking that we continue to promote the implementation of 988, and we are making sure that our county is also educated on the implementation of the 988. And I believe we're trying to get back to the slide. Thank you. And so essentially just making sure that those calls are flowing correctly and that everyone is being properly served. Protocol 2 is basically an agreement between our mobile crisis regional hub, also known as Regional Crisis Call Center, and law enforcement. So essentially, when we submit our local plan required for the implementation of Marcus Alert, we will be working very closely with our regional partners to ensure that when calls are transferred to 988, and in the event that they escalate, we want to ensure that there's proper protocols in place to make sure that the proper services are dispatched. I do just want to share that the Regional Crisis Call Center at the moment is working on building mobile crisis teams. So that is also something that is coming down the pipeline, and more information will come out about that as they implement, I believe, by December 1st of this year. Protocol 3, as Lieutenant Proud had briefly mentioned about CIT training. Protocol 3 is how we get our officers trained to ensure that they are responding to behavioral health calls in a behavioral health compassionate manner. So as he mentioned, ACPD is one of the best partners. They're very hands-on, they're very interactive, and they're all for making sure that their officers are trained. As of this year to date, we will be having our 5th CIT training the first week of December. So as of now, we have over 50 first responders trained throughout our county. So we're really excited about the continuing process of making sure that our first responders are trained, and most importantly, our partnership with law enforcement. Next slide, please. So essentially, Marcus Alert, as I mentioned, we have response levels. When everything is concrete, when you have that solid foundation, and when you have agreements and response levels in place and protocols, being able to respond to behavioral health crises are much better in that caliber in terms of having things in place. So we have these response levels that we implemented. We work very closely with our partners on implementing them. And it's basically a 4-tier level triage. So the first level is routine response. These are matters that can be transferred from 911 to 988. So as demonstrated on the slide, it's more so an individual who's distressed with a possible altered mental state, simply needs someone to talk to. That call can be transferred to 988 or emergency services, also within DHS, and they can be reached at 703-228-5160. Level 2 is more so someone who is having those type of symptoms, but more on an elevated level. So distress, but with no homicidal thoughts, intent, or behavior. However, they may present suicidal thoughts. So as we know, that is someone who needs in-person care. So we can have our stellar MOST team dispatch, which you'll hear more from Mike Keene about. We can also have our community partners dispatch as well. And those partners are CR2 and REACH. Level 3 is more so co-response. So level 1, 2, and 3 will still be behavioral health led, but level 3 is when law enforcement comes in, where EMS comes in. And this is someone who is presenting very aggressively, florid psychosis, homicidal thoughts, but with no active behaviors or intent. And so we have law enforcement come for the safety of the individual experiencing the crisis, but also for those around them. And we have behavioral health lead this scenario to make sure that that person is getting the proper behavioral health that they need. Level 4 is law enforcement led. As indicated on the slide, this is someone who has direct, immediate threats to life. So not only are they not safe for themselves, but others. So we have law enforcement go out to make sure that the matter is de-escalated, and we will still have behavioral health and EMS within the vicinity, but they cannot come onto the scene until deemed safe by law enforcement and after the crisis has been de-escalated. So essentially, this is a quick synopsis of how we have worked hard to build these response levels and how they will be carried out moving forward. Next slide, please. Thank you all so much. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mike Keene.
Good evening. My name is Michael Keene. I work for the Treatment on Wheels and PATH program, doing homeless outreach to people who are not yet involved in mental health services or need help getting connected to mental health services. I was also involved in the design and implementation of the mobile outreach support team, which is what we just heard about. I'm going to go back a little bit further in that sequential intercept model, what we discussed before, involving getting people into mental health before they enter the criminal justice system. What I do is I do homeless outreach. So I go out in the community and I seek out people experiencing homelessness. And for people experiencing homelessness who need connection to mental health services, what I do is I develop a rapport with them and I attempt to connect them with mental health services. It could be their first time getting connected to mental health services, or it could be a person that did participate in one point and we need to re-engage them and we need to get them affiliated once again with mental health services. The important thing to keep in mind with homeless outreach as it relates to mental health is that it's much like the emergency room. We can go to the emergency room when we have a heart attack and just start addressing our health at that point. Or what we can do is we can start taking care and participating in preventative medicine. So that's what our goal is with TOW and PATH, is to go out into the community, identify individuals that need connection to these services and facilitate that. It's a lot of hand-holding. It's a lot of rapport building. Our philosophy on the street is that we're not just going to write down a suite number and an address and tell you where to go and when. We're going to shepherd you through these processes, and we're going to be part of that handoff from our team of outreach workers to the providers and the clinicians that are going to perform those services and get them in touch with those services. And we're going to also see them through that. As I'm sure anyone can attest, when you are visiting a clinical environment, whether it's medical or psychiatric, there are a lot of barriers, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of paperwork. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting down and helping fill out the intake paperwork at Department of Human Services for these individuals. But again, it's a lot of rapport building. Research demonstrates an average of 19 times of offers before a person experiencing homelessness accepts help and participates in that. Now, 19 is the average, but we have had individuals that accept these offers the first time, and we've had individuals that we spend literally 2 years developing rapport with before they participate in these services. So it's a lot of time with them. It's a lot of trust that needs to be established. And, you know, we need to be, in their eyes, as someone that's trustworthy and dependable in, frankly, a system that has before either not helped them or they've had issues with in the past. So we want to go out, we want to connect people to services. What does that mean? Sometimes, even if they don't need mental health care, we can take them to Path Forward, and we can take them to the day program where they can get hot meals, where they can do their laundry, where they can get a shower if they need. They can also get connected to outreach workers and case managers there, or seek shelter if they want to. The way I see it, if they're connected with those services, if they are at the day program, or if they're at their appointments and they're getting the care they need, we're talking about a far less likelihood of that individual getting into some type of conflict or trespassing or these nuisance crimes that we often see get committed, and the police have to get inserted at that case. So I do outreach, but I also get referrals. So I typically get between 15 and 20 referrals a month. In the last 2 months, I've got between 45 and 55 referrals each month. So referrals can come from the public by calling a hotline that's on the county website for tow and path. Referrals could come from the shelter. They could also come from the police. In fact, the Arlington County Police Department is our largest source of referrals. And again, these are individuals who are out there in the community, and they might interface with someone that they identify as in need of needing mental health services. So they'll reach out to me, and I will follow up as soon as possible with following up with them to see how we can introduce them to those services. Next slide, please.
You need to wrap up, Michael.
Yes. All right. So the difference between the program I work in right now and Treatment on Wheels is it's very program specific. So we are gearing this towards people experiencing mental health or a co-occurring condition with substance use. The Mobile Outreach Support Team is a new program. It's the first of its kind in Arlington. As was previously stated, we're talking about a clinician. We're talking about a peer recovery specialist with lived experience in substance use and mental health disorders out in the community being dispatched directly by 911. So these individuals are on the radio frequency with the police department, and they're also allowed, as just stated, to go to the calls, and they're constantly monitoring whether this is something they can go to by themselves or whether the police need to go first and make it safe. But the important thing to emphasize in this is that this is done in lockstep with both 911, police, and fire assets. Now, Treatment on Wheels is specific to people experiencing homelessness. The Mobile Outreach Support Team is not. The Mobile Outreach Support Team is there to connect people in Arlington County with the Department of Human Services, no matter what that might be. It could be an age-related issue with dementia, say with aging and disability, or it could be someone that needs help with their rent that they're behind on, and they're about to get evicted, and they might be in crisis because of the stress related with that. The goal of most is to get there, identify what they need, and get them in touch with those programs and perform that same hand-holding if necessary to shepherd them through those processes. Next slide, please. The Mobile Outreach Support Team, the goal is to connect people in the community with mental health and substance use treatment. That's a photo from our van. We're out in the community. It's marked as a county vehicle. They are out there going to these 911 calls, again, trying to connect people with mental health services. And as we stated before, there's 3 different essentially responses for the Mobile Outreach Support Team. The first is going on their own if it's a very innocuous scene and they're able to do so safely. The second is going jointly with police. And the third is police go first, secure it, and then they call them in after the fact. The important thing to keep in mind is that at any time, if the police, for whatever reason, are dispatched alone, and it's determined that, wow, this might be a call that involves mental health or Department of Human Services need, they can summon the MOST team to come in. Next slide, please. So the Mobile Outreach Support Team goes out. Again, they do triage, they do screening, they do mental health first aid. They attempt to do a mental health assessment, de-escalate the situation if necessary, utilize active listening and de-escalation techniques. They're going to coordinate with medical and behavioral health services, again, to achieve a better end, to get these individuals in touch with services, get them what they need, get them stabilized, and then do follow-up if necessary to make sure that those relationships were made. And again, to circle back to Treatment on Wheels, the Mobile Outreach Support Team is also able to refer clients to me so I can follow up and determine their needs as it relates to experiencing homelessness or a co-occurring condition. So dissemination of harm reduction tools is also a big part of this as well. The Mobile Outreach Support Team can distribute Narcan as well as fentanyl test strips. So there's a big harm reduction component into the Mobile Outreach Support Team operations. Next slide, please. So the methodology for the MOST team, they operate from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. We just started out in late July. So we are just getting started. We have 1 shift and 1 vehicle at this time. So they operate between 1 p.m. and 9 p.m. That was purposely chosen because that's when the most calls come in involving mental health for the police department. So we wanted to utilize this program where it's most helpful for them. Again, it's to perform homeless outreach, show up at scenes and determine mental health or substance use treatment needs, connect people with those needs, determine whether there are other needs, whether it's hunger, whether it's shelter. And we also want to identify people who may have fallen off from care previously and getting them to re-engage with that mental health care or substance use treatment. But a big part of this is delivering the client directly to services if we can, participating in that warm handoff, and following up to make sure that those services are substantive and are helping them with what they need. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask Tiffany to discuss the new developments with our Crisis Intervention Center.
I think we better go on to our Q&A time now.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay, can we
Bless
have
you.
1 minute or?
Yeah.
Okay, so very quickly, we have our newly Crisis Intervention Center located at Sequoia Plaza, specifically Sequoia 3. And essentially, it is a safe place for individuals to go when they're in crisis. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to individuals of all ages experiencing a crisis. We do have a wonderful team that consists of licensed mental health therapists. We have a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, registered nurses, peer support specialists, and then our special conservators of the peace, SCOPs, who may accept custody of individuals under emergency custody orders, also known as ECOs, for behavioral health evaluations. SCOPs can also provide transportation to facilities outside of the CIC. So in terms of services, it's basically 5 stabilization units where individuals have their own privacy. They can go and de-escalate when they're having a crisis. They have food, they have clothing, there's showers as well. So a safe place for them to go to get that assessment that they need to figure out the next best step for them and for them to thrive as individuals and move through their behavioral health concerns. Thank you.
Well, that was a jam-packed series of presentations. There's a lot going on. I had no idea. I think we're ready to go for Q&A, and we've got some. I'm going to go from the ones that came in this morning, and then I'll go to some of the ones that are on now. And there's a couple that are just relevant to what you and Mike were just talking about. How do you know how many 911 calls have been diverted to 988? And how many have come directly to 988? Do you have any numbers on that?
So at the moment, due to the fact that we have not implemented Marcus Alert yet, and we are focusing heavily on training, and we don't want to overstimulate call takers and dispatchers, that's something that we will be managing as we move forward with the implementation. So we're going to be tracking not only those numbers, but also numbers pertaining more to most, which is already being tracked, crisis intervention numbers, crisis intervention center numbers as well. So how many people come in through the CIC. So that is a really big aspect of the Marcus Alert system, because we want to ensure that the system is actually working. So that is something that you all can check back in with us at a later time when we have those statistics to share. Thank you.
There was a question this morning. It was a good answer. Thank you, Tiffany. There is a question from Audrey Kremer about special programs for elder adults who are homeless and have an illness like depression. Is shelter diversion out? What are their options? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly who should answer that question.
I can take that. I have pretty frequent referrals to the Office of Aging and Disability as well as Senior Adult Mental Health. So as we are all aware, there are a host of medical as well as psychiatric, considerations for geriatric issues. So we have a very robust, again, Senior Adult Mental Health, and we also have a nurse practitioner assigned and retained by Path Forward, for example. Very, very knowledgeable. There's also medical respite rooms that are available at Path Forward. And we've had senior citizens discharged from the hospital that are experiencing homelessness and gone in directly to those medical respite rooms. So there are accommodations that can be made for senior citizens who are experiencing homelessness, and there's a host of services available to them.
Duke Banks asked, there's no mention of the involvement with faith-based community. Many churches have programs to help the homeless, yet the presentations did not mention this. How can they be integrated into this effort?
My answer would be they already are. We have a host of connections, whether it's with Arlington Assembly of God, whether it's with St. George's. There's a host of faith-based organizations that we work with. We just didn't have the time to get into that tonight. Whether it's their food pantries or whether it's referrals for a parishioner that might be in need. We work very, very closely with the faith-based organization in Arlington. Like I said, it just was not something that we were able to delve into this evening.
Okay,
I
thank you.
would just add, if anyone is interested in participating as a member, the Continuum of Care Executive Committee meetings, we have a number of also subcommittee where we discuss policies and interventions. I can send that information to Jeannie to send out to the committee members.
Yeah, be good. What steps, this is from Devanchi, I think she wanted to make sure we were had a little bit of information on this on the state level. What steps, if any, should be taken at the state level to assist programs like TOW, PATH, and MOST?
Right off the bat, I would say from a state level, I would say staff. We have one employee that performs for the Department of Human Services outreach to the homeless. That's not the only resource for the homeless, but that is the only outreach position. We obviously have resources for people experiencing homelessness for the mobile outreach support team, not just with TOW, but I would say, more assets in the form of people and materials would be helpful. On a community level, what we would definitely ask of the community is to just muster their empathy and understand that these services are voluntary, and participation in these services are most often predicated on their willingness to participate. So often we'll get referrals from the community or even complaints, just expecting us to come and remove people experiencing homelessness. And that's not what we're there to do. We're there to connect them to services. So I would just ask that the public, muster their patience and understand that these things take time and rapport.
This is a question from Ignacio Sosa. Should Virginia establish something similar to California's CARE, C-A-R-E courts? I don't know if that's even a part of this topic, but so no, we're gonna have to take a pass on that. Beth Gauss has two questions about the mobile crisis team. How do the police interact with the mobile crisis team? And what are the hours? I think you mentioned this in your presentation, but just to repeat it, what are the hours of mobile crisis team?
Mike mentioned the hours are from 1 p.m. until 9 p.m. And the police have very proactive engagement with them. And the best part, and I cannot be a stronger advocate for this program, because this is a very much boots on the ground program that gets folks from DHS out with the police in a very proactive co-responder model to offer those services and direct individuals that would otherwise have to be solely dealt with by law enforcement. And so, as Mike had mentioned during his presentation, they are equipped with a police radio, a mobile computer that has access to our CAD. So they see calls, and our officers have been very embracive of having them come out to do proactive assessments if we can. Sometimes most can go out and deal with something without law enforcement ever touching or engaging that person. And it has become exceptionally helpful to us, but also more importantly, it's gotten them in front of into the services that they need.
And let's see.
I would like to also add, just to echo off of Lieutenant Proud, due to the exceptional work that our MOST team has been doing thus far, I would like to announce on behalf of our Deputy Director, Deborah Warren, that with Marcus Alert, when we implement the funding that we will get from the state, we're going to expand our MOST team due to how effective they have been in the community and pouring into our community members. So we'll be able to have an additional team with a new van and also expanding hours of operation as well. Thank you.
And I think that is about it. There's one last question, and I don't know whether you can answer this or not. Is from Babar Sheikh. Are we over medicating? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Steve?
I would just say that that's not something, I don't think that that's something that we can, anybody on this panel could really effectively answer.
Okay. That was one of the ones from the morning too. So I think that we may have chosen not to ask that at another point. Elizabeth Jones Valderrama asked, I wanted to confirm that we do have specialized courts in Arlington and City of Falls Church. There is a drug court and a behavioral health court. That's good to include that information. Okay, well, I think frankly that's it for the evening. We've answered all the questions that have come in live and this morning. So that means we can say good night. And I want to thank our panelists. This was a very enriching conversation, and I'm amazed how much information we were able to pack into it. Our next meeting will be January 9th, as I said earlier, and we will get back to you on when and where and how. And in the meantime, happy holidays, and we will see you in the first of the year. Thank you.